Previously on Rob's Model Shop.
I'm just kidding. Not even I'm that dorky. Well, last time we did a lot of 3D modeling, we did some Illustrator work, a little bit of Photoshop, and then we ultimately printed it. So in this episode, we're going to be finishing up by doing a lot of sanding, filling, and painting. Let's go ahead and get started. First of all, we just need to glue all these parts together. Just good old-fashioned 5-minute epoxy bonds really well to this PLA plastic. So I just put those halves together and then a little bit of tape to ensure that it doesn't move. And I just glued the two parts of the handle together. And you can see that just the raw print already looks really good. Of course, we're going to sand it up and make it look a lot better. Here's how the nameplate looked after I cleaned it up a little bit. And just a simple test fit on the base. And the hammer seems to fit as well. I did a little pre-filling with just that same 5-minute epoxy, and now I'm just taking the X-Acto and cleaning it up a little bit. And then a little bit later I'll come back with some regular plastic filler. With just about any 3D print, you're going to need a little bit of touch-up, so I'm just using my X-Acto knife to clean up a few areas. So time to whip out the Vallejo plastic putty. As usual, I'm just using my fingers. It seems to work really well and you never have to search for the tool. At least I hope you don't. Because I'm doing a lot of filling around these edges, I am losing some of the surface detail. I really like those 3D print lines. It makes it look kind of like brushed metal. I'll have to deal with that later. Because I didn't use any support material, some of these areas, such as this crease here, have a few overhangs where the filament kind of drooped a little bit since it can't print into air. It did surprisingly well here, but I still need to fill it up. Next time I'll probably just be a little more careful where I add support material such as that, so it'll prevent me from having to do more filling as I'm doing here. Using any type of putty, it's going to shrink a little bit, so you're going to have to do this a few times in order to build it up enough to have it perfectly smooth. Then I just used a file to touch it up. I also filed down a few other areas that needed a little work. Here we have a couple more of those areas where the filament drooped a little bit, where I probably should have used support material. This is probably easier, to be honest, just doing a little cleanup after the fact. And it certainly helps out on the print time. With a model all nice and smooth, it's time to lay down some primer. A little bit later, I added some black paint as well as a clear overcoat. I roughed up the back of that nameplate and applied a little bit more epoxy and put it in place. I didn't show you this in the video, but I went ahead and primed and painted the base part and also added a few coats of clear just to get it nice and smooth without having to do a lot of sanding. Now it's time to put down some silver on that hammer. I mixed in a little bit of black just to tone it down a little bit and not get just pure silver. Starting off with a black base really makes the silver shine as well. And any part that doesn't get coated well, the black will show through and actually give it a lot of depth. My personal preference for airbrushing is to lay down a thin coat of paint before I try to put it on too thick. It just seems like it primes the surface a little bit better and ultimately gives you a little bit smoother finish. Although I've seen people just cake it on there and it ends up looking fine. So now we have a nice coat of metallic on everything except the part where I'm holding. I'll hit that a little bit later, but now it's time to add a little bit of weathering. I'll be using some Vallejo model wash. You do need to give it a little bit of a shake because it does settle. And with washes, you don't need to be careful. You can just gob it on, and then you can later just wipe it off and leave it in all those recessed areas. Using the same wash, I'm just going over other areas that I'd like to see a lot of contrast in. I'm just keeping in mind where grime and dirt would accumulate over time and trying to hit those a little extra hard. You really just gunk it on and use something and wipe off the excess. I actually used a matte clear coat before this. Usually I use gloss, but even with matte, you can get away with moving this stuff around and removing it if you need to. With a matte coating, it does tend to stain a little bit, which is actually what I wanted here. I wanted it to kind of stay where I put it. So that's the reason I didn't use a gloss coat. Although I did want the base really smooth, so I hit that with probably 3 to 4 pretty heavy coats of gloss. A sponge makes a really good tool as well. You can get a lot of really subtle details without having to try too hard. So with a sponge, I'm just dipping in that same model wash and wiping off the excess on a paper towel, and just very gently dabbing on color. And again, just thinking about where the dirt and grime would be building up. With that same sponge, I'm just dragging down gently to create some streaking. And the key to this is don't get too much wash on the brush. You want as little as possible on there just so you can build it up gradually. I switched back to the brush to do a few more details, but I'm still using that same model wash. With a brush, I'm just adding a few streaks here and there randomly to make it look like it's been used and probably hit a few people in the head with. When you lay down these washes thick, they do take a little bit of time to dry, and here I'm just going over this area one more time to add a little bit more depth and contrast between the lower area and the detail. Here's a good example of how you can use a paper towel or a rag to just blend these areas together just to get the effect you're after. Here you can see those 3D print lines I was talking about earlier, and when I did sanding and filling, I did lose some of those, so I'm just going back with an X-Acto knife and just rescribing those in. Here I'm using some Tamiya Weathering Master pigments. It's kind of like makeup for your models in a way. Here I'm just lightening up a few areas that got a little bit too dark with a wash. I'm also going to touch up some of these sort of leading edges of the hammer where it gets a little bit of wear and tear. And it's starting to look pretty good. And you can probably see a few random scratches in there too. I just use the X-Acto knife for those. Now it's time to work on the handle. I'm just laying down that same silver color as before. To paint the handle material, I'm just mixing up a few different colors. I purposely made it a little bit too bright and saturated just because it's going to dull a little bit as it dries, and also I'm going to go back over it with some washes. And that will definitely darken it up. This actually took a little bit of time to paint all this in. It's a little bit of a pain, but I think it turned out really nice in the end. For the weathering on the handle, I'm just going to use some Tamiya Panaline accent color. You definitely need to shake this stuff up as well. The pigments tend to settle in the bottom of the bottle. Once again, I'm wanting to put this in the creases that would collect all the grime and dirt, and then come back and get rid of some of the excess, and then I'll just go back and forth and build it up to get just the look I want. I want something that looks like it's been used a little bit. Just like the wash, you may want to build up a few different layers of this to really get the darkness you're after. You can see that I'm leaving quite a bit here really to slowly build up the color and get away from that super saturated red. Make gravity work for you with this stuff. Just kind of be careful that it doesn't bunch up or get into areas that you don't want. I'm going to use some Vallejo matte varnish to get rid of some of the shine on the handle. This was a little bit of a failed attempt to try brushing it on. Didn't work so hot, so I just grabbed the airbrush and did it that way instead. It's just really hard to see what you're doing when you're putting a clear coat on with an airbrush. A lot of times you'll be wondering if you're getting any on there and then it starts puddling up on you. And here we have a Thor Hammer guaranteed to impress all the ladies. I think I hear a few at the door right now. Thanks for watching and join me next episode. We're going to be building a Star Wars K2SO model from Bandai. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you haven't already, destroy that like button. See you next time.